So the insurgents, the opposition against the coalition, instead of using IEDs, I mean, we still got hit with IEDs in my platoon, but we got hit with RKG-3s all the time. Well, I shouldn't say all the time, but I mean, like, that was the most frequent attack in March of 2009. My platoon, like the platoon I was in, was responsible for 1/3 of all RKG-3 attacks in Iraq, and I'll break down these videos.
Casualties here in Iraq are caused by roadside bombs, or IEDs as they're known, improvised explosive devices. They're responsible for 80% of U.S. casualties. But another weapon is now taking more and more American lives. And as Lara Logan reports, it's almost impossible to defend against it.
What you're about to see in this Al-Qaeda propaganda video is a brazen attack on U.S. soldiers with a hand grenade that's more deadly than any other. The explosion is huge as 3 of these armor-piercing bombs find their target.
You see how close the perpetrators are able to get to the vehicles without being caught with the shrapnel? That's because it's a shape charge weapon. And, they definitely experienced the concussion. And a lot of those people probably end up with significant hearing loss and even traumatic brain injury symptoms from being in such close proximity. The thing is, you've got to take, a person needs to take better cover from any shock wave, because a shock wave is a atmospheric change in pressure. And essentially, whenever a shock wave happens, there's 2 waves to it. And there's actually cavitation that develops, which is essentially a vacuum, which is what it's essentially the lack of pressure that drives the eardrums out because of the like I said, like a dome is built to withstand pressure from the outside. I mean, a sphere from the outside. From the inside, I guess it holds. Maybe that's a bad example, but continue on.
It's not a new weapon on the Iraqi battlefield, but CBS News has learned it's being used more now than ever. And for the first time, the Army has admitted this weapon is killing its soldiers. Captain Benjamin Jones led me to the place where he lost a young soldier.
Those are T-walls. They're all along Iraq, and sometimes they're on at corners. And these bases, they line up right. I mean, if they're sent the right cornerstone, and it creates a void in the gap, between the structures, which allows people to do things. In this case, it was just thrown over.
To one of these hand grenades in June.
The vehicle was right there. They had thrown a grenade right over that wall.
Right over these barriers?
Right over that barrier.
21-year-old Private First Class Veach of Fort Carson's 2nd Brigade Warriors died after the explosive penetrated his armored vehicle in Baghdad's violent Dura neighborhood. So did Warriors Private Stephen Davis, less than 2 weeks later on the July 4th holiday, also in Dura. a key strategic area Al-Qaeda desperately wants to take back from these soldiers. The terrorist group has been eager to take credit for the use of this lethal weapon. 3 months ago, their organization in Iraq announced the creation of a new thermal brigade and paraded these men in a video posted on the internet. They even used diagrams to show how this Russian-made weapon actually works. That matched military explanations obtained by CBS News. When the pin is pulled and the grenade is thrown, a small parachute is released. It stabilizes the grenade and ensures it comes down vertically on its target. The shape charge inside punches through the armor, and slow-burning explosives are released to ensure the deadliest effect. During the battle here in Dura, the army says more and more of these hand grenades are being used. In firefights like this one that suddenly broke out during our visit there last week, it's yet another worry for the soldiers.
The attack was led off with by a catastrophic explosion.
Captain Jim Kearsey tells me armor-piercing hand grenades were used against his men on this street corner in a massive complex attack that killed 5 of his soldiers at the end of July.
Turned south down this road.
In another attack, Staff Sergeant Paul Crenshaw was almost killed just a few yards down the road when one of these grenades were thrown over this wall into his vehicle, wounding him and his gunner.
At any time, there was a crowd of people as we drove by over here. It could have been any one of them standing there just waiting for us to come by.
The soldiers say it's impossible to know when ordinary-looking civilians at the side of the road, like these men in the Al-Qaeda video, will suddenly launch. The soldiers say it's impossible.
Watch this. The locals always have their hands behind their back like they were at parade arrest. And especially due to loose garments and the local attire, it made it very hard to distinguish when an attack was going to happen.
To know when ordinary-looking civilians at the side of the road, like these men in the Al-Qaeda video, will suddenly launch their deadly weapons. And that makes attacks like this just about impossible to stop. In this environment, winning over the population is critical for U.S. soldiers, so they can't treat ordinary civilians on the street with suspicion all the time, and that makes them especially vulnerable to this weapon. Katie?
And Lyra, I understand these weapons are dangerous not only for those who are targeted, but for those who are using them.
Well, as you can see in the video, the backblast is so huge that they start to run away as fast as they can, and they're not particularly accurate all the time, but they're cheap and they undermine the advantage the U.S. has in terms of high-tech weaponry and heavy armor, and that makes them very effective for insurgents.
Lyra Logan. Lyra, thank you so much.
That's what we dealt with when I was downrange. Let's see.
When this vehicle was blown apart by an improvised explosive device, an IED, debris flew in every direction. IEDs remain the #1 killer of U.S. troops in Iraq. But look at this picture provided to CNN by the Army. It's one of the first images shown publicly of the damage caused by a new type of IED, a so-called explosively formed projectile that can penetrate U.S. armored vehicles. The energy of an EFP blast is focused in one direction, right at the vehicle, leaving the armor full of blast holes. In this case, 4 soldiers were badly wounded. Lieutenant General Russell Honore, who trained soldiers headed for Iraq, is one of the few talking about this type of danger.
When the energy is concentrated in a small area, it projects out that metal, and that metal can be effective against almost any armor, including the M1 tank.
In this photo from May, 2 explosively formed projectiles hit the door, penetrating the armor. The driver was killed instantly. Another photo shows an attack against a contractor's armored vehicle by 2 of the new types of bombs. Army documents accompanying the photos call these weapons an extremely serious threat. The technology has been available for decades. Much of the information exists on the internet, but it is new to Iraq. Here is how they are made. One end of a steel pipe is sealed with a plate. Then, the detonation turns the plate into a lethal dart that travels at a rate of more than a mile per second. It can penetrate 4 inches of armor from a distance of more than 300 feet, according to the Army. U.S. and British intelligence believes Iran and Hezbollah has now provided expertise to the insurgents to make the weapons. These new bombs have even been packaged in...
No, they have been sold. The thing is that there was a lot of abandoned items during the first Afghanistan war. Excuse me, that created a surplus. And those are being distributed. They're not, they're RKGs. You know, as we've seen in the previous videos, they're not improvised explosives.
Where's my shoes? RKG, come on, throw one at me. Throw one. I dare you. Come on, you bitch. You know what? So we get an RKG thrown at us. We're supposed to... Jones is supposed to shoot with his M4 as opposed to using the Crow. Yeah, you have a better shot. It's not gonna take him too long to acquire it with the Crow. I see. Makes sense. So it's about quickness, not about death dealing. It's about, yeah, speed and target acquisition. Oh, come on. That's what it's all about. Alright, dude, you're good.
Well, I'm not too certain what I just kind of proved there, but
Right.
just going to, you know, mission and whatnot. But, you know, I survived a few of those. And now I want to, like, I've had several buddies wounded and a lieutenant killed by this weapon. Yeah, like, and we got hit by IEDs too. I was on dismount patrol when I got hit by an IED. You know, luckily all I got was freaking disoriented when it all happened. But you know, y'all ever have anyone try to kill you? And even though I've had people try to kill me, if I try to kill anybody, not intentionally, no one thought. That's not my style. Be safe, be kind, stay strong. I love y'all.